Today is Tuesday, Parashat Devarim. In the parasha of this week, Moshe Rabbeinu speaks about the establishing of a judicial system of appointing judges. And the pasuk says, "Vatzaveh et shoftechem ba'it ha'il lemor, shamua ben achechem ushfatem, tzedek ben ish uben achiv uben gero." So the pasuk says, "I instructed your judges at the time, saying, listen among your brethren, and judge righteously between a man and his brother or his litigant." In other words, the obligation to judge cases in between people that are litigants or they have an issue that they need to clarify in front of a bedin, in front of a rabbinic court. And the next pasuk says, "Lo takiru panim b'mishpat." Don't show favoritism in judgment. You have to be impartial. You don't favor one side as opposed to the other. And also another explanation, in appointing a judge, don't show favoritism to certain people for whatever reason. It should be somebody who's really qualified to be a judge, and when he judges, he shouldn't be favoring one party as opposed to the other. And it continues by saying, "Kakaton kagadol tishma'un." Small and great alike you shall hear. In other words, somebody is wealthy and somebody is poor, you give them equal importance in hearing them, in hearing their side of the story, and not to give preference to anyone. Also another explanation, that even if it's small amount or a very large amount that is being discussed, don't underestimate anyone. You cannot say, okay, this one is poor, I'm going to give him preference. As opposed to, you have to be totally impartial, small and great alike, whether small and great people or small and great amounts or subjects to be adjudicated. Lo taguru, the pasuk goes on to say, Lo taguru mipene ish. Don't be afraid from anyone. Before any man, don't be afraid. Ki mishpat lelohimu. Because the judgment is Hashem's judgment. You cannot say because you're afraid of one of the parties that you'll just favor the other one. V'adavar asher yikshem mikem, and whatever will be too difficult for you to decide, takrivun elai, you can bring to me. Moshe is saying, ushmativ, and I shall hear it. In other words, there is the lower courts and the higher courts, so that Moshe Rabbeinu will be the final place where they would go if they would have a hard time in the lower courts deciding a case. But with that being said, not to show favoritism to any side, to be able to hear all sides, to give importance to any amount, whether it's small or big, in being adjudicated. Judges, rabbinic judges, realize, and there are many references to this, how important it is that they judge exactly, properly, and so they're so afraid to, by mistake, improperly adjudicate a case, that typically in business cases and many different situations, most of the cases, the greatest majority of the cases, the judges recommend that the people compromise between them, that they discuss and they arrive to a compromise where both sides agree to, rather than to cut and say you're right and you're wrong, because you might make a mistake and it will be very, very serious. Sometimes what appears to be the person who's right, maybe not all the factors have been presented, not all the aspects have been considered properly. So it's always better to have the people do a compromise between them, so both of them agree to whatever final agreement they get to, and rather than say this is the one who needs to pay the other person. And always, if we can do shalom, peace, by compromise, it will be better than to say you're right and you're wrong, paying back because maybe it was a mistake. And the idea also here that Moshe emphasizes, not to be afraid of any person when you judge people, and not to show favoritism to anyone, but rather to be totally impartial in any case that is brought in front of the judge. And in the book of Devarim, which we're starting this week, Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, goes through the history of them being in the desert, but also gives them instructions and direction for when they'll be in Eretz Israel and they establish in the land of Israel, the cities and the society will be developing, etc. And part of it is the judicial system to be placed and as a very important part of any society, and in this case, to do it according to the laws of the Torah. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.